Hey, I'm Father Mark Mary. Don't. You say your name, you don't touch me.
Oh, I'm Brother Elijah.
And I'm Jackie Mulligan.
And this is 100%. All right, so food. We talked about fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And food's part of our, sometimes we got food all the time. Mm-hmm. But food's part of regular life. We don't often think, though, about like why we're eating. Like, is there like a purpose to it? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit, about sort of like reframing, remembering why we eat, the purpose it fills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we're looking again at our health as the state of our body and the state of our soul together, we want to think about eating as a way to feed and nourish our soul, and also to feed and nourish our bodies. On a physical level, when we eat, we should think about things like fueling our body with the necessary fuel. So that should mean that what we're eating is enough to sustain our output, which sounds relatively basic and obvious, but sometimes often we don't do enough of. But on an even deeper level, when we eat, really try to eat to sustain a healthy gut and immune system, which is in our gut, to help balance and keep maintaining healthy hormones. And then also to help with a healthy psychological response. And I say that because a lot of times food has a negative reaction on our systems. And so that might look like things like sugar causing a lot of very temporary energy and then a huge slamming crash. And then also something like potentially over-consuming coffee and resulting in a lot of anxiety. And so this key of understanding why we eat and really nourishing our bodies and our soul is really, really important. And that takes really tuning in to say, how do I feel? Do I feel sustained? And is this affecting me positively or negatively afterwards? Sometimes people will experience digestion discomfort after eating, and that's a big sign that that food did not jive well with you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we want to make this like separation between, you know, what's good for our soul and what's good for our body. And the reality is like, we can't kind of live in this, with this idea of like, I can treat my soul really well and, you know, I can go to mass and like have this really great spiritual life. Meanwhile, like I'm living off of like fast food, you know. You can sustain that for some amount of time, but to think that it's not going to have any effect, I think, is unrealistic, because we're not a body that has a soul, and we're not a soul that has a body. We're a body and a soul. So we are this unity. Like that's our nature. So when we're feeding our body well and looking at things of, okay, what sustains me and my ability to love others, to serve others, to have the energy that I need in order to give myself, because we can't just give, and we're not refueling rightly. So like, what are we putting in the gas tank?
Mm-hmm. And I think part of the evidence of the relation between how we eat and how we encounter God, how we serve God's people, is the fact that how many of the people of your clients are religious or priests?
About half of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And are there any experiences from them that kind of hammers home this why the nutrition is so important for the spiritual life as well? A
particular priest that I work with correlated the connection between when he ate sugar to when he sinned. When he kind of realized this and said the act of contrition and said, avoid whatever leads me to sin, he said in that very minute he realized that it was sugar. You know, years ago I was at a seminar and I learned that that coffee could create anxiety, or the presenter kind of mentioned that she would kind of pick a fight every day around 10 o'clock after her cup of coffee at 9 o'clock. And it stirred something in me, and it took me a couple of days to really admit it within myself, but it was certainly true that caffeine was negatively affecting me. You know, this sounds cliche and commonplace right now because it's what a lot of people are practicing, but elimination diet is really the best way to go, to take major food groups out, like gluten and dairy and sugar, alcohol, caffeine, all the fun stuff, one by one for a short period of time, 30 days, maybe one at a time, and then bring it back in to give your body a break from it, and then bring it back in to see how it might affect you. Right. And really paying attention to how it affects you physically, but also spiritually.
Mm-hmm. Can you give like some examples of, okay, what are some great things to have in your diet? Yeah. Some things that you really got to seriously think about cutting out.
Yeah, well, let's focus on what we want to eat because there's actually so much that we can. So we'll start with what Mother Nature gives us and God's greatest gift that He gave to us in abundance, and that's fruits and vegetables. And so that should be a majority of what your plate looks like is fruits and vegetables. And then really focusing on some healthy fat. So that can be anything from avocado to olives, olive oil, things like that, nuts and seeds. And then different proteins. So for some people that could look like animal protein, and for others it could look like plant protein. And things that may determine how we eat and what we choose to eat will be really individual to us. So just as we would pray differently throughout the year, we would also be invited to eat differently depending on our body's needs. So it's not like we're going to we enter into prayer relatively the same way. There's like some staples, but our needs differ. And that's the same thing with our fuel. And so it's really, it's important to tune into things like genetics, health history, your goals, your blood type, to really understand what you need specifically. And so there's not one generalized way to eat. And that's the beauty of what I do in my practice, also what I see in my practice, and I'm sure what you may see in some spiritual direction as well, is that there's not just one approach to fix anything or to heal. You really have to kind of try a few things and then tweak them and learn what your body needs, which changes over time. So it's really the Lord keeping us hungry and really allowing us to make these changes as we go. As life kind of changes, stress, diminishes. Maybe sleep requirements are higher or lesser. But it's important to really focus on the real whole foods. And then I've mentioned a few times now the foods that really I see trigger a negative response for people who already have dis-ease going on in their body would be things like gluten, dairy, sugar, soy, and alcohol. So I would recommend taking even just one of them out at a time and then bringing them back in to really see how it affects us.
So here's the thing, Jackie. Seems like a nice idea, but like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's just the answer. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think like, so at first it's like, especially if one of those things that you love is on those lists, or all 5 of those, like I love alcohol, I love coffee, I love gluten, etc. And you have like a violent reaction to like what Jackie is just saying, pay attention, right?
Yeah,
like,
right there.
Like,
what we're clinging to the most is really what we need to take away.
There's like a real, I remember the first time I was like, okay, I'm gonna do just 24 hours on water, not gonna eat 24 hours. And I went back and forth, like inner dialogue, like on and off the whole week before that day of like, I'm gonna have coffee, but like that's basically brown water, right? Like, come on, it's water. So I did this for like the whole week, and finally I was like, okay, seriously, like I need to, this is like an inordinate attachment, like I can't even let it go for a day. Could I say the same thing about the Lord? Like, could I let him go for a day? So then I was like, okay, dang. So the Lord convicted me. It was like, just let it go for a day. And since then, my relationship with coffee has been just very different. So like, I don't need a full cup of coffee in the morning in order to feel like awake and present and etc. So like, that was literally taking like a day off and just drinking water and like getting some of those toxins out. So I think thinking about it, it seems really intense. But first of all, like, you don't necessarily need to do everything all at once. That's not the best way to go anyways. Just like take a baby step and then you experience, oh, okay, I'm not actually gonna die. Like right when I take that cup of coffee out or that gluten or that bread or whatever. So I think part of it is like baby steps. It's not that, and you'll survive.
And I think it's important to also realize that this doesn't mean that there's like that these foods are necessarily bad and that we should 100% take them out. For certain people, for a certain amount of time, it may be beneficial to take out. There are others who they know that no longer could they, does it sustain them or make them healthier. But it is healthy every once in a while to celebrate. It's part of our faith, and so I think it's important to just really recognize that there's this beauty of food, of sitting together, of literally breaking bread together, of the power of community, of traditions. It really, food connects us to one another and brings us together. And so I don't want it to kind of be this thing where it then becomes your God, where focusing on your diet or taking things out becomes your God and your focus. It should be that the focus is to grow closer to God because of the foods that you're choosing. And if by eating these foods they negatively affect you, then we're going to take them out. Whether they're going to go out forever or not is a process that we would discern through prayer, but there by no means should be walking away saying, I'm not eating these things because they're not healthy. They are not going to make you healthier, but it certainly wouldn't be fair to label them completely unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And the kind of like the sign-off phrase we've taken for these videos, it's poco a poco vamos a llegar, like little by little, and that's kind of what you touched on a little bit. Is like, all right, relax. It seems like a lot. Like, oh, you take everything that.
Just go from 3 cups of coffee to 1, and you'll be okay.
Brother Elijah, Jackie, thanks for reading with us. Thanks for the series. I think it was good and challenging, and maybe it might be like the most challenging stuff we put out there yet.
Yeah.
But we're capable of doing hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The grace of God,
Yeah.
So
that's right.
So I'll just close with like a little prayer. I think it's from 1 Thessalonians. May the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May He preserve you, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. We thank you for watching Somos Peregrinos, even on this journey of eating and fueling the body well. Poco a poco, vamos a llegar. We're going to make it. Peace, y'all. We'll see you.
God bless.
Bye.